What is your name and what is your involvement with Holstein cattle?
Randy Hoyer. I used to own a herd of 40 Holstein dairy cattle.
What is your name and what is your involvement with Holstein cattle?
I'm Linda Gross, and my husband Sean and I had a herd of registered Holsteins for about 25 plus years that we merchandised a few years ago. I also grew up with dairy cattle, particularly Holsteins, here on this farm, so I've kind of been around it my entire life.
What is selective breeding?
Selective breeding is a breeding program where you mate individuals based on specific traits to improve those traits in the next generation.
What is the process in selectively breeding Holsteins?
So you choose the characteristics of your first generation that you want to improve, and then you select individuals to mate them to that have the characteristics to improve those specific traits.
What is selective breeding?
Selective breeding, particularly for cattle, means that of all of the traits in a Holstein cow, whether it's her milk production, her fat and protein percent in the milk, how durable her feet and legs are, how tall she is, long she is, how well attached her udder or her mammary system is, those are all traits that we can select for by looking at sire proofs. And I'm going to select for traits that I think make the most profitable Holstein cow. One that will live the longest, will produce a lot of milk with good fat and protein components. And no bull supplies everything, no cow supplies everything, so I'm going to look at her family and I'm going to decide where she needs the most improvement. And that's how I'm going to select a bull to breed that cow to.
What is the process in selectively breeding Holsteins?
Everybody does this a little bit differently. For some dairy farmers, they will do all of the selection themselves on their farm. For large dairy farms, a specialist will come in and will look at the entire herd and will give them different numbers and different categories to score them, punch it all into a computer, and then it will match them with Holstein sires that provide the desired characteristics to improve those traits. And so it can be done on a small scale or a large scale. In simple terms, it's just hand mating. You're looking at this animal and you're deciding, how can I make her next generation more profitable or better than the current? And that's the type of sire you're going to select to breed her to.
What are you looking for in a Holstein cow that you would selectively breed for?
You would selectively breed for increased production and traits that will increase longevity of the cattle in your herd.
Why might someone selectively breed Holstein cows?
To improve the genetics and for greater profitability and longevity of their cattle.
What are the advantages when you selectively breed cows?
I think the advantages are that your herd improves more rapidly at an accelerated rate. You're going to be investing money in using various sires. The better ones obviously are more costly than those that are just getting proven, the younger sires. But we've always felt that that money was worth it when you looked at your herd. You have to take a long view. Genetics takes time. When you breed a cow and she does become pregnant, she carries that calf for 9 months, and then, of course, if that calf is a heifer, she's added to your herd, and then you raise her for 2 years before she enters the milking lineup, and then it takes her 1 year to do her first lactation of milk. And so it takes quite a while to see if that match was good. And I received an encouraging text in this past year from a young man who bought cows from us when he was starting out at 15, and now he probably bought cows from us over a 10-year time period. And he said that his herd average, the average amount of milk produced by each of his cows each year, had gone from maybe 17,000 to 24,000 pounds of milk per year per cow. And he talked about how the cows looked and how uniform they looked and how much he liked their feet and legs, how much he liked their udders. But it had been kind of a 10-year view that he shared with me, and he was very pleased. A lot of those cows had come from our herd, and for me, that made me feel good. That was one of our goals for being in the business, was not only for our herd, but that our cows could go on and impact the genetics in other herds. And so you do it because it helps you accomplish your goals.
What are you looking for in a Holstein cow that you would selectively breed for?
When we would look at sire proofs, over the years there are certain sires in the Holstein industry that were just, they had several daughters out there, and there had been many sons out of those sires that had been used. There were really solid bloodlines, so sometimes you stayed with certain bloodlines because they were proven, but within that you would choose for production traits such as milk pounds, fat percentage, and protein percentage. You would choose physical type traits such as correctness of feet and legs, so she's very ambulatory, can get back and forth to the milking parlor, can get back and forth to the waterer, the feed bunk, a well-attached udder, correct teat size and placement, so when the milker is attached, she milks out completely and doesn't have issues with that. But you can also select for things like reproductive performance. The level of fertility, is it easy for her to become pregnant every year and have a calf each year? That can also be very genetic. Also things like somatic cell count, which is a measure of the white blood cell count of the milk. A high somatic cell count would indicate that the cow is fighting an infection in her udder, and so udder health is also something that you could select for. So it goes from production traits to physical conformity traits into management traits like somatic cell count and fertility.
Why might someone selectively breed Holstein cows?
I think a reason to do it varies with the producer. It depends on the goals that you have for your dairy herd, what herd average or milk production level you'd like to be at. It depends on how much money you're willing to spend on genetics. And to see those improvements, so it's going to be probably a different answer for every producer. When I would sell cows to other producers, sometimes just young producers that were starting up, maybe in their grandpa's tie stall barn, they had a certain size cow. They couldn't have a really big cow. They needed a smaller cow that was comfortable in that stall. Or maybe in their case, some dairy farmers milk 3 times a day. They can probably have a cow that produces a lot more milk because she is able to be milked 3 times a day. Maybe it could be possible to have too much milk for some cows. If they're only milked 2 times a day, it might be actually adverse to her health if she had so much milk. Maybe you might breed for more fat and protein in the milk and in case. And so it's really kind of up to the individual producer. That's a nice thing about being a farmer and being in business for yourself. You do get to make a lot of those decisions yourself.
What are the advantages when you selectively breed cows?
Long-term increased profitability and decreased cost.
Are there any disadvantages to selectively breeding these types of cows?
By selectively breeding, you might overemphasize one particular trait that over the course of time it may have negative effects on the cattle.
Are there any disadvantages to selectively breeding these types of cows?
I suppose a disadvantage could be that it takes a little more effort and time. If you naturally breed with a bull and the bull runs with the cows get bred without your even being aware. When you're breeding artificially, you need to determine when that cow is in heat or is able to conceive, just that 18-hour to 24-hour window each month when she is able to conceive. She needs to be bred at the right time. The semen needs to be prepared properly. There's many things that need to happen in order for her to conceive, so that takes a little more time and effort. So I would say it's probably easier just to do natural breeding, but your herd will not advance and will not gain ground as quickly as it will when you're able to select from the best genetics in the world.
How fast do you see changes in cows?
It does somewhat depend on the trait that you're selecting for. Some are very fast changes and improvements over a couple of generations. Some take many, many generations.
How do you know if you are making progress?
keep good records, and you can see the changes and the progress made based on the results that you see in your records.
How do you know if you're making progress?
Well, most dairy farmers that are using selective breeding techniques with artificial insemination are also keeping meticulous records. The DHIA, the Dairy Herd Improvement Association, provides that you test the cows once a month for milk production, not only the pounds that they're producing, but the fat and protein percent of the milk, and you keep very careful records on them. You also have a health record on the cow that says how many times does it take this cow to become pregnant. Can you breed her once and she becomes pregnant each year, or is it an average of 3 times? So you can also track the reproductive performance of these cows, as well as their health performance. Keep a vet card on every cow, and you can determine when she has her calf, does she start right off to the races, go into that milking lineup and start milking and do well, or is she kind of draggy for the first month or 2 and has trouble getting going? All of those are genetics that you can track, and then you select and keep those cows that are best meeting what your goals are.
How fast do you see changes in these cows?
As I mentioned previously with the text I'd gotten from Kyle this past year, it can probably take at a minimum 3 years, up to 5 to 10 to 15 years. I look at, as a family, we look at old slides and we showed calves in 4-H. And what we thought were pretty good calves when I was showing in 4-H, our kids look at them now and they laugh at the calves I showed in 4-H, because to them they look short and round and fat, and they show heifers that are tall and angular and strikingly dairy. And I think about how much it's changed. Of course, that's a much longer view. That's a generation of 25 years or whatever. You can really see big changes the farther out you go. But at least modest changes can be realized in as little as 3 or 4 years.
Does it cost more to selectively breed?
In the short term, yes, your costs are going to be higher. However, return on investment over many generations, as you see the improvements because of selective breeding, return on investment will be greater.
Does it cost more to selectively breed?
Initially, there is a cost for choosing those specialized genetics, but in the long run, selective breeding pays, or you wouldn't be doing it. I think every investment that you make on a farm, whether you use more expensive seed corn versus something that's cheaper, whether you adopt greater technologies that are usually more expensive, you have to be in it for the long run. And at first, there is an expense that you are outlaying, but hopefully the reason you're doing it is that you'll have greater rewards at the end. And such is true with selective mating, and even when it gets down to past the dairy side of things and into crop farming, the hybrids and the varieties that you're choosing to plant in your fields tends to be, if you pay more up front, you're doing so because you believe you'll receive a greater yield at the end, whether that's in milk or crop production.